Welcome to the High Performance Herd. Today, we're lucky to have with us Jill Pellegrino, Chief Executive Officer of AutoCruitment. Jill, you and I have had a quick conversation in the last week just to learn a little bit about you and AutoCruitment. I'm excited about our call today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, Jill, I always start these conversations with kind of what drew you to leadership? What late in your life said, yeah, hey, I want to lead a team. I want to build something bigger than myself. I mean, whatever the attraction was to leadership, when's your first memory of that?
Yeah, I don't have like an exact moment. It's not something I would say I planned for from the beginning, but something I kind of grew into. My background's in mathematics. I love math. That's what I got my degree in. So when I was out of college, all I was looking to do was to find a job where I could do cool stuff with math. But very early on, I got frustrated by, just doing reporting and analytics and not really being able to contribute to the business. So I went looking for a business job that was more hands-on, where I could use that data and analytics skills. And I found a company called Acurian, which was a small company in the Philadelphia area that was working on patient recruitment and clinical trials. And I was at that company for 14 years. And it was basically a startup that ultimately grew to be the largest patient recruitment company in clinical research. So I had the benefit of being exposed to different parts of the business, and my career grew with that company. And I also, at that time, developed a passion for helping clinical trial enrollment, because it was at that time where I learned about how long it takes to get drugs to market and how inefficient it is and how costly it is for pharmaceutical companies, and how there's a big opportunity to help patients get better connected to clinical trials. So I stayed with that company. It grew from like a 40-person company in the Philadelphia area to a global organization, where ultimately I was a general manager. It was about 2,000 employees across 11 countries. And then from that point on, I really kind of stuck with companies and stuck with leadership roles in this space and trying to address the gaps that exist in clinical trial enrollment.
So, couple questions along that. What was the attraction to math, first and foremost? Where did that come from? I have the same. I was a math major, so I understand that. But I'm just
Yeah.
up to other people's story. Like, how did it start? What was the early days of math that made that interesting?
There's not many of us, and people
No.
don't really relate or appreciate that I liked mathematics. I don't know. It's just a subject I liked in school. And I just, I wasn't a big reader, wasn't big in English, really liked mathematics. And, I learned in high school that mathematics could, put you in a good position for strong careers. There was a demand for computer science at the time. So I feel I always felt fortunate that I was able to pursue a career in a subject that I just genuinely enjoyed.
So, second is you grew up in this kind of recruitment type business,
Hmm.
and a lot of that time spent at AES, or that company. From a here's what I learned there. What would you share with the audience? Like, yeah, my experience there set me to do this. I saw these things firsthand. I got to do X. What's kind
Yeah.
of your reflection now about your development during that time?
Yeah, and I was there for 14 years. So the beginning years were very different than the ending years, and I've learned different things along the way. I mentioned it was first Acurian, but we eventually were bought by a company, and then we made acquisitions, and we rebranded for Accelerated Enrollment Solutions, or AES. So when we were smaller and we were Acurian and we were just a smaller company, um, I think the reason I got the opportunity to work in so many parts of the business is because we were a really small company and we were very focused on just solving problems. We didn't have as much infrastructure in place. It was more about everybody kind of just jumped in and rolled up their sleeves. Um, so I learned to be scrappy. I learned to think quickly. I learned to be responsive to our customers and the market environment, and really push stuff through the business quickly. So that was like the early part of my career. And then as we grew bigger, we were acquired by a CRO PPD, which is a 13,000 person company. Um, we were then a business unit within that company, and then we started acquiring site networks. So we acquired a site network in the US, we acquired one in Europe. So now we're a global organization within a larger organization. So there I learned a lot about the differences, how you run a big company versus a small one. You don't really have the freedom just to jump in and start working on something because you have more structure and roles. But I also learned a lot about global management, um, managing, because I acquired teams that were in Poland and the UK and South Africa, and that really, challenged my management skills. And what worked for me in the past definitely didn't work for me there. And I had to learn many different ways of working with people and bringing together teams.
So Jill, that was going to be my next question. And you gave me the perfect lead in. As you think about team development, harnessing the power of a team during those, I'll call it later years where you had greater challenge, what did you find worked? What did you see in your shift in style? How did you essentially inspire teams to do more?
Yeah, I think I learned very humbly the need to educate the teams about the different businesses, about the ways we do work, and to allow them to come together to figure out how to work together. So I had to do a lot of in-person meetings. We were traveling over to Europe a lot of FaceTime, and really get the teams in a room to start figuring out, like, how is 1 + 1 = 3 now that we're a combined group. How do we take the best of what we've done in the past for our new organization?
Yeah.
So that's really how I brought them along and had them working together. But then I also, as I was establishing my leadership team in the newly integrated organization, I was, selecting people from different parts of the organization so that it was a more diverse group. Um, so we were bringing in, the benefits and the skills from both organizations that we were integrating.
And as you reflect on that time, I'm sure it serves you well now. Are there key lessons that you take forward and go, yeah, hey, I made some mistakes. I learned this. This has stuck with me. This is how I now lead. And some of that I heard, like typical change management. How do I set vision? Was there anything there that you go, man, yeah, that was really good learning for me to take on forward?
Yeah, I think well, the other aspect that I've learned at AES is I was a very large organization, and as I shared, I was general manager by the end, where it was 2,000 people. So it also really forced me to be more structured in my management style, and um, that was really when I started thinking about management frameworks, having more formal KPIs in place, goals, etc. So that was definitely something I've taken along with me in the leadership roles I've had since then, and definitely something I lean heavily on at AutoCruitment. Even though we're a smaller organization, some of the principles and the aspects that I learned in the large organization absolutely apply.
Yeah, well, I think and we'll probably go there. This whole business operating framework. How do I think about, vision? What does that look like? I talk about all that as there's a need from leadership to inspire people to believe in something. So that sets the where are we going? What are we doing? Some semblance of values. How do we want people to act and behave? And then how are we setting expectation? And almost always that's metric driven. We want to get to this. We want to do
Right.
that.
Yeah.
See, I always start to frame, well, then I have to transition vision. What do I want people to believe into action toward that belief? And, I spend time with leaders always going, that's the harder part. Like we
Yeah.
can, and then we need to act on it. Need to motivate
Yeah.
people to work really hard toward it. So you leave AES, you could talk about that departure, short stint and not that short, but a couple years at CVS.
Yeah.
What precipitated that change for you?
That was just opportunistic. The opportunity came up at the time. CVS Health was going into clinical trials. It was during COVID, and they saw the market opportunity to participate more broadly in clinical trials. So they were looking for leaders to come into the business and really start that from the ground up. And that was just such an exciting, unique opportunity that I had the skill sets for. And as I shared, one of my passions, my whole career has been about figuring out enrollment solutions for clinical trials, and CVS has treasure trove of patient data and access to be able to do that. So that's why I left. And that was, I was there for about 3 years. Um, and that was essentially a startup in a very well-funded startup in a large company, where we were building that clinical trials business for CVS. And I was there for 3 years. So we grew that team pretty significantly. I think my business went from 20 people to about 100 people by the time I left. Um, and then eventually CVS made a strategy change, and they were no longer investing in clinical trials. So that really what opened up the door for me to take the role at my current company, AutoCruitment.
Um, is there anything worth sharing at your time at CVS? I mean, most people know the company. It's a large company. You talked about it well, like, well, yeah, I'm not working so much in the large company. I'm
Yeah,
working in funded, which I was fortunate to have a similar type role at Roche Diagnostics, where hey, there's this startup business
yeah,
that sits inside of this $8 billion company, and you're like, yeah, it's awesome because I don't have to worry about funding, but it's also not the focus of the large company. So
yeah, yeah. I mean, we could probably do a whole podcast on my time at CVS. I think for me personally, uh, one of the reasons why I went there is because I wanted to learn more about the healthcare ecosystem beyond just clinical trials. And that I absolutely got the opportunity to do that, to really better understand the market dynamics, who the players are, and what are the impacts on patient when drugs are in the market. So it actually helped me understand and appreciate that the problem that I'm working to solve in clinical trials, which is how do you find somebody who like meets this very specific criteria for an opportunity and get them the opportunity to participate in that trial? Like that problem exists everywhere in healthcare
yeah.
for approved products too. So it really helped me like broaden my vision about the opportunity to help patients be connected to healthcare opportunities in general, not just clinical trials. So that was what I was leading at CVS, but I carried that into AutoCruitment as well, and that is something we're thinking about in the future. And the roadmap is expanding beyond clinical trials and really helping patients with approved products and healthcare in general.
So, talk about the beginnings at AutoCruitment. How did the transition take place? How did they find you? You find them? Um,
Yeah. Well, I've heard about AutoCruitment in the space. They were a founder-run business, run by Bethany Bray and Ben Cooper. By the time I brought in, I was about 10 years into the business, and they were pretty successful in, I would say, leading the charge on using digital advertising for patient recruitment. So in about 2022, they were acquired by QHP Capital, which is a private equity firm in North Carolina. And I think about that time, they were starting to think about a transition. The founders wanted to step back, and they wanted to bring a leader in to really lead the organization to its next stage of growth. So they had reached out to me, and I was I was really intrigued. At the time, timing was good with CVS winding down, but I was also really impressed by what AutoCruitment has built. And over its history, we've worked across 700 different studies, 120 conditions. We've been successful in accelerating trials for our customers globally, not just in the US. And those are all strengths of the company that I know a lot of other patient recruitment firms don't have. So I was super excited about the opportunity to join the business. Still am. And I was also looking forward to going to a smaller company and really being able to, focus on and in clinical trials.
so eventually take the job, join, and I always start with the first days. What did you find? So always subtly different than what we think from the outside. We get in and you
Yeah.
know, bad. Here are the things that I find when I have to start. And what did you find?
Yeah. Well, it was a founder run business, and it was really a founder run business. So, um, the founders were really involved in everything. I mean, they built this from scratch. So as the company grew, they just still managed most of the company. So they were involved in sales, they were involved in finance, legal, operations. So I knew that was what I was walking into, but not to the extent of it. So that was the first thing I found. And then the other thing, which this surprised me, because AutoCruitment was so successful in the space, I did not realize that they didn't even have a commercial function. They had no sales team, no marketing team. All of their business came from word of mouth and repeat customers, um, which is just a testament to the performance. But at the time I came in, the market was changing. So that was absolutely not going to work moving forward. So I had to build a lot of those functions from scratch when I came into the business.
Well, so I mean, this is for the audience as well for the two of us. Working with hundreds of companies a year, I go, this is typical entrepreneurial founder. Yeah,
Yeah,
they get the business to a
absolutely.
point, and that's what they know how to do, and they've done that
Yeah.
really well. And then, particularly when PE or VCs involved, they're like, well, we want more than that. We want scale. We want growth. We want,
Yeah.
and they're very comfortable and like, well, this
Yeah.
is what I'm able to do. And as you've alluded to, that doesn't mean they don't grow, but it's not the hyper growth, real change. Do we have systems that allow us to scale? Do we have the
Right.
team that
Yeah.
allows us to do that?
Absolutely.
Typically,
Yeah.
that's where we are. And so, I love this topic for the listeners who are facing it, which is, well, what's required in that change to go from the very classic entrepreneurial success to, all right, well, now we need to scale the business. We need systems, process, and people
Right.
that will allow us to do that. And a shift. And you and I talked about that a little bit last time. Kind of, I think you even framed it kind of like hub and spoke. Like everything goes back to the hub. Everything goes back to the founder. They're
Yeah.
involved in
It's
it.
very, yeah. Yeah.
To a more traditional, no, I have a really strong leadership team. They're responsible for their area. And you've been there long enough to probably see some of that take hold. I always reference, John, I'm curious in your take, when it starts to happen, you move from I'm frantically involved in everything because that was the requirement to I feel a little lazy this week. Like I'm not doing everything I used to do because other
Yeah.
people are now doing it.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
you have some of that aha in the last couple of years?
Yeah. Yeah, I laugh because I do feel that way sometimes. Yeah, the first year that I was in the business, as I mentioned, I was really focused on starting some of these functions from scratch. So hiring a sales team, getting a marketing function in place, establishing what our brand presence and our value messaging is going to be in the market. Um, at the same time, I was putting in place the leadership team, and a framework that we use to manage the business, what we call the management system. So that
Before you leave, Jill, that's a
yeah.
PE driven, hey, here's our approach, kind of it sounds like for anyone who's familiar, EOS scaling up, here's a vision forward, here's our metrics, here's a score.
Yeah, yeah. So QHP Capital, they developed a framework of a management framework that they want their companies to use. So it's consistent. And yeah, David, I think you're right. It's very similar to EOS. The concept is you start with from two for the business. This is what we're working towards. What is our vision? And then how does that translate down to how we want to work as a team? What's our purpose? What's our mission? What values do we embody? And then that translates into how we do the work. What are the roles and responsibilities? What are the functions? What are the KPIs that each of those functions are being tracked against? So that has been a big focus of my time with the business, is really putting that into place. And I think it took like a good year and a half to 2 years to really get a good understanding of what was the appropriate structure for AutoCruitment. Like what were the right functions that we needed? What were the right KPIs? Um, and really also learning how to get the leadership team engaged in that and owning that so that it translates into results.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that. I think that's a powerful message, which is early on, and Simon Sinek talks this about whether this is culture change, system change, whatever. Any big organizational change is like going to the gym. When we first try it, it doesn't feel. As a matter of fact, it hurts. Yet when we look in the mirror, nothing's different. And I'm sure you lived through some of that. And you go, yeah. Despite that, in 6 months, we go, yeah, it's not quite as hard, but we look different. And it sounds you lived through some of that. Talk about that journey. What did it take for your leadership team? How did we drive that? What were some of the early pain points and successes?
Yeah, I think like some of the early things that we worked through and learned is like what are the right functional leaders that we need and what are the right KPIs. Our business is fairly complicated in terms of delivery, where we need we have the intersection of multiple disciplines. Like we're a digital advertising company because that's how we engage patients. We're also a clinical company because we have to qualify these patients and make sure that they'll meet the protocol. But we're also an operations company where we work with call centers and different teams to manage the patient funnel. So it's a lot of different disciplines that have to come together in order for us to be successful in delivering against our contracts. So it took us a little bit of time to do that. I think for the KPIs, we've learned that less is more. When we first started, I think we had 50 KPIs. Now we're down to about 10. Um,
It's funny. I throw this all the time. I go, the right number is somewhere between 7 and 13 is what I
yeah.
tell companies. Like,
Yeah,
that's the big,
they tell you that too, and you just have to live it to believe it, right? You have to figure out what are the right ones too, right? Like it was also a lot of just experimenting and getting an understanding of what are those right 10 KPIs for the business.
yeah, awesome.
So we worked through that. I think the biggest learning for me though, as a leader is to really see the results from that and to really see the impact on the business. You have to bring the leadership team along with you and have them own it. It can't be a top-down approach. And I think in spirit, I've always tried to embody that with the management system with my leadership team, but it took me some time to really learn what's the best way to get them engaged, get them participating, contributing to the strategy so that we're not spending time debating, is this the right strategy? We're spending time executing against it and solving problems.
And I assume in that there's a subtlety in that, and then probably not. Like, well, it just becomes cadence. Early on, when you look at that, and you alluded to like, well, it's more than just the vision. We're not debating the vision or strategy. We're looking at, is this working towards some goal? Um, I recently saw something about high performing, high accountable teams. They talk about it's how we handle issues. Like when there's an issue and it's not moving the way, do we try something different? Do we bring it to the group? Do we have open conversation about this isn't working and here's why? That's hard for teams at first. And so, were there subtle things you did? Were there not so subtle things? How did you get through some of those challenges of, yeah, this is our plan. How are we doing? What do we need to do differently?
Well, there was a lot involved in that. So I think first in trying to get the team to really own the strategy. Um, I think for our business, getting people excited and motivated about our mission is pretty easy. Our mission is accelerating clinical research by unlocking patient access. So everyone knows somebody or has been impacted personally. So that part was easy. What was harder, and I had to help the organization get on board with, is like showing them that it's possible to meet our growth targets and that we're in a good position to do that.
Mm.
So I try to really help bring the outside view into the business, like showing them the market opportunity. This is where the clinical trials are. And then also showing them how we compare to our competitors. Like this is why AutoCruitment is in this position and why if anybody's going to be able to achieve this, it's going to be AutoCruitment. So that was, a change I had to make in terms of, how I was presenting to the organization about how and why we should be able to achieve this growth.
So,
But
so
then
Jill,
how we actually go ahead, what were you gonna
I was going to interject for a moment because I think
yeah,
it's a key point. I always start to frame this that we got to set vision and values. We got to let people know where we're going and how we want them to act and behave. But the third thing for me was like, well, what are the expectations? And you're talking about that very directly. Like the team didn't believe the expectations you were putting there. Like we can grow this much, and they're like, yeah, we
yeah,
haven't. We don't believe it.
right.
And so I go, somehow we have to inspire to believe. And it sounds like you did that in a bunch of different ways where they started to go, oh, this is possible. And is that what you're describing? Where eventually they went and go, oh, well, we can do this. They started to believe, and then you take action toward it. It is that what you're describing, or
Yeah,
something?
yes, and I think part of that was, like, helping that, like, bringing them along to figure out the steps to do it. So really breaking down, this is what we're gonna do this year, this is what we're gonna do in the future, and this is how we're gonna get there, and having them participate in that so that they can voice up the obstacles they thought we were gonna face and, what they would need to be successful in executing against this plan.
Well, in two of my companies, Jill, this was an exercise we did every year. We're like, well, if we have to double next year, what would we have to do?
Yeah.
It's not, are we going to double? It's
Right.
what would we have to do?
What
If
would we
we're
have to
100
do?
million, we
Yeah.
want to do 2 million, what would we have to do? And
Yeah.
what I loved about that exercise every time is there was really good stuff that came out of it. And then we're like, well, yeah, then we should do that, right? Like,
Yeah.
this was one of the things we said would help us double. This
Yeah.
is our idea. Well, great. Let's flush that out. How do we do it? What's there? Versus the typical budgeting process that's like, well, we need to grow 17%. And people start to incrementally do, here's the subtle thing versus, well, what's possible? What could we do? So it reframes. I always go, reframing expectation is awesome for teams
Yeah.
because I go, we tend to land near the target.
Yeah.
So
I like that framework. Double the business. I'll try that next time with them.
yeah,
It's a good
and
mental exercise for people to go through to think, or like, what are going to be the real drivers of growth that we should be focused on as a business?
you got it. And particularly with I'm like, I have to be able to go back to them with assumptions that are real. Like, we can do this because this assumption says that we do that. And
Yeah.
then we concretely have the assumption written somewhere and go, well, we thought this would bring on, a 20% conversion and we're only seeing 12%.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that then the assumption was just wrong, but now we can, is there a way to get to 20%? How do we do this? And so it just, it informs all of our growth strategy and tactics in a way that instead of incrementally starting where we start is,
Yeah.
well, what could be? So, sorry, I cut you off with that whole detour.
No worries.
Um, was there anything else in getting the team on board to this higher expectation vision forward? That's where you were when I interjected.
No, I mean, I think getting them together, them to write the strategy with me was key. Um, you talked about how you've seen where the companies that are successful, the ones that are solving problems together and really diving into to fix things. And I think that's also something that we're really trying to embody. Um, we have the strategy that we have in place, and then when we meet as a management team, because we did all that upfront work to put together that plan and to put together that strategy, we spend the whole time focused on, all right, how are we doing? Are we on
Awesome.
track? Are we not on track? Why are we not on track? Um, and it is something I'm really proud of, where the team really does work collaboratively, where it's, they're stepping in to help each other, and everyone is working towards the same shared goal for the company. So everyone is aligned and motivated to make sure that each function is successful in reaching its goal.
So, Jill, I always talk about any of these frameworks like, I always joke and I go, it's sort of like dieting. We know what we need to do. Like, I need to put down the cookie and I need to exercise. The business operating is the same thing. Yet,
Yeah.
what we have to then do is have some sort of cadence to hold ourselves accountable to, are we doing the work? Are we on the diet? Are we on the plan? For you at AutoCruitment, what's the cadence? How do you and your management team meet? What's the frequency? What does it look like?
Very, very frequently. That's another learning I would say we have. The management systems best practice is monthly. You have an operating committee meeting, but we've learned with our business, at the pace at things are moving, that we need to meet more frequently. So, as an executive team, we're meeting weekly. And we're doing like a mini version and review of the metrics on a weekly basis for about an hour. And then on a monthly basis, we'll meet for about 4 or 5 hours. And that's going more in depth over the goals and the plans. And then there's certain parts of the business where we're meeting daily. We're still building up some of these functions. And so we found that the daily check-ins have been helpful with the teams to make decisions quickly and move things along faster.
Yeah, Jill. I mean, you're moving right to what I've seen as best practice for, I go back to the diet thing and
Yeah.
go, best companies I've seen in my, last 7, 8 years with a couple hundred a year is they have regular cadence, and the regular cadence looks like, if needed, there's a daily stand up.
Yeah.
There's something that happens daily. And I like the stand up because you go, that should be a quick meeting. That should be I always put it in quotes, a production meeting. What do we need to do based on yesterday, today?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then weekly, you're dead on what I've found, that the best leadership teams meet weekly. That they have a cadence, and it starts with scoreboard review, I call it. And you guys are doing that. Like, well, are we healthy? Are we doing the
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then what do we need to talk about if we're not
Yeah.
healthy? Um,
Yeah, I find that those daily meetings it seems more in the virtual environment how critical it is, because if we don't have them, people just, their days are dictated by whatever meetings they have. They don't even, end of the week, they don't even know what they worked on that week. It just takes over.
I'm curious. I always talk about it as we're more intentional. We have a daily plan, we have a weekly plan, we have a monthly plan.
Yeah.
That we have end in mind, our vision document, and we take that time to have cadence and intentionality. Again, we land near the target. We're talking about the right things. We're prioritizing the right thing, doing the right work, and we're able to shift and solve if needed. You alluded at one point, like we found we needed to meet more often. What
Hmm.
drove that for you? What was the aha of like, yeah, monthly's not enough?
I think that was really more related to bring all the teams into it. The leadership team was pretty aligned. We knew what we needed to accomplish, but then each leader's function, their team members below had to work in a highly coordinated manner. As I talked about, it's a multidiscipline operations team. So it's about 4 different teams that all have to work collaboratively in order to meet our goals. And then there's also other factors that come in where we need to make decisions quickly. Our customer preferences, cost issues. There's just stuff that's surfaced. And we found that if we're not engaging with that team regularly, sharing what the goals are, sharing what the priorities are, they end up thinking everything's a priority, and they're just like working all over the place, and it's very stressful for them. So uh, that's really what drove it, is to really keep the entire organization focused on the right things so that we were moving the needle, but also not burning people out.
So I'm sitting reflecting for a minute and going, hey, pretty awesome 2 years in terms of transformation, it sounds like.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
whether you agree with that or not,
Yeah,
that's
no, I
my
appreciate that.
listening to it like, hey,
Yeah.
that's really powerful. The team and culture are probably remarkably different than where they were. If you had to summarize, well, what made that happen over the last couple of years? What comes to mind first?
I think it was do you mean like what made the need, like what drove the need for this type of transformation?
No, no more like what we were able to.
Okay.
What was behind it? What was most important? If other teams are trying to embark upon this, and there are plenty of people going, "I need to change." I always joke and go, "Well, you have a perfect system to get the results you're getting."
Yeah.
And then most people go, "Well, I want different results." And I go,
Yeah.
"Okay, well
Yeah.
then what do you think has to happen?" And you've lived through that. And I always go, "Well, what did it take? What's the aha post that go like, well, of course we needed to do this. We needed to push and do that. This is what drove our
Yeah.
success." Is
Yeah.
there any
I
reflection you
think, I think we, like having a new leader come into the business, it was very clear that like something had to be done in terms of how we are going to manage the business. So there was alignment across the business. It's PE owned now. The founders were stepping out. So it's kind of a good starting point to start thinking about that in the business. So it wasn't hard for me to get the entire organization aligned on, all right, we're going to implement this management system because this is how we're going to do it. So I think that part was easier on me. But I mean, the driving force is that we want to grow the business, and it the market is changing. As I said, AutoCruitment was one of the first pioneers of doing digital advertising for patient recruitment. They're no longer the only ones. There's a lot more competitors in the space. So we rolled out several new services in the last 2 years as well, um, to really improve the quality of patients that we're putting in trials, to expand the types of conditions that we're working in, and to acquire new customers. So that has all driven the need also to think differently about how we work. So that would be new processes that were coming into the business and new product offerings that was putting pressure on the old ways of working, that really kind of forced us to change certain parts of the business to meet that demand that we were having.
so now in the rearview mirror, what's changed? What will you or what can you share with the audience about? Well, what have we done in the last couple of years,
Yeah.
and what are you most proud of?
Yeah. So what's changed with AutoCruitment is that we've really evolved our product offering and have a much heavier focus on down the funnel performance at randomization. So we introduced new pre-screening solutions that allows us to um, not only just rely on online pre-screeners, which is self-reported information from patients, but we now have a process in place where we have RNs that are doing a clinical review with the patients. We also have a new technology offering where we're able to extract medical records um, pretty quickly for patients. And we have an AI overlay on that that helps us better qualify patients. And we've also restructured our contracts and our pricing models with clients. So we're much better aligned with what our clients want, which is committing to contributing patients into a trial. So that fundamental change in the way that we operate and our product offering has allowed us to grow our top line. We've increased our business, our customers beyond just those loyal repeat customers that the business has seen. It's also allowed us to expand into harder to reach conditions. Because now that we have these tools in place to be able to find more specialized patients, that allows us to really expand the types of conditions that we're working in, as some of the harder ones like MS and Parkinson's as an example. So that's kind of the journey we're on now. We really want to uh, continue to perfect the way we're finding patients to grow our foothold in the clinical trial market. And then, as we look to the future growth of AutoCruitment, that's really where we're thinking beyond just clinical trials and how we can help patients get connected to healthcare opportunities.
We didn't talk about this last time, so if you don't want to answer it, it's fine. I always pause in this and go, there will be plenty of people that live in a PE environment that understand this. You've lived through a transition. Sounds like we're starting to see scale and success. As you reflect for a moment on like, well, how do I manage this PE environment? What advice would you give others in the same scenario, if willing?
I think everybody has a slightly different experience in a PE environment, right? And the growth pressure is what's really put on leaders in a PE environment. I could say that my experience hasn't been that. That I think the QHP is actually very supportive and is one of the reasons why I was excited to join this business. They have a really deep appreciation of this market and what's needed for companies to grow. So I've always kind of seen them as a partner.
Awesome.
Um, and just maybe that would be my advice to leaders is really try to bring, the PE firm along with you in the business so that they're a partner and supporting you in growth, as opposed to somebody that you're just answering up to about where it's EBIT.
Well, and it sounds like they already are fundamentally from a philosophy there with
Yeah.
their management system, KPI. All of this becomes, I used to joke in some of my PE environment, like, well, they have a wish for it to be bigger. And I'm like, well, I understand your wish for it to be bigger, but there have to be assumptions that allow us to get there. And if we don't have that figured out, then we don't have a solid growth plan. And it sounds like they're very grounded in reality. And the way I always framed it as well, and I'm curious here, is if I can have that honest conversation with them and then deliver close to the target, they're going to be happy. If it's promise and disappointment, they're going to be unhappy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and when you step back from all that, you go, well, that makes sense. It's just hard to get
Yeah.
that common agreement up front. And I used to joke, and I had this learning in one of my early businesses that wasn't PE backed, was be a hero once a year. And the way I used to joke about that is that's not when we set the plan. Like there's no
Yeah.
reason to be a hero when we set the budget.
Yeah.
There's a reason to be a hero at the end of the year when we accomplish it. And so
Yeah.
I drive that to our teams like, yeah, I want aggressive, high expectation and plans to get there. And then we can adjust. And so is there anything along those lines? It sounds like you've framed that, but I just
No,
want
I think you're right. In recognizing that they're grounded. They actually have a transformation team in QHP that is in the businesses should they need it to help with implementing the management system. They have somebody to help with hiring. So they acknowledge that there's work needed to grow businesses. The other thing about the management system, and this is one of the things I really liked about it when I first heard about it, is it really does create a common language. between the businesses and the PE firm. So we don't spend a lot of time like arguing over the numbers, debating what's going on in the business. It's very easy for everybody who's working within our management system, whether they're in the business or outside the business, to have visibility and transparency into what's going on.
Well, I love that. And I want the audience to understand because I think there's a key thing you just said there. Now we can discuss what isn't happening to get us to our plan versus argue about something else. We're like, well, this said, this is what we're going to do. This is what we tried. What we thought was going to happen is not happening. And now we can dissect that as a team, be aligned. We again solve the problem versus argue against something that doesn't really make sense. We can now go back and go, well, what was wrong about our assumptions? What did we do potentially ineffectively against what we thought we were going to be able to do? Great. What do we need to change? And that grounded conversation helps everyone. It just becomes now we're again all battling the right
Great
problem.
problem. Yes. Yeah.
And I used to joke and go, if we're fixing forward, great. Like, how do we have that mindset? Let's fix it forward. What are the things we need to do? So you described that, and I just couldn't let that go. From a sounds like again early scale success, we're starting to see growth in many ways. If you look at the next 2, 3, 5 years, whatever framework you want to use, and go, here's what we expect to happen. How would you talk about that?
Yeah, like I said, I think right now what we're focused on is expanding our market share in clinical trials. So that means acquiring new customers and expanding our current capabilities into different disease conditions. As we look to the future, there's still a whole group of disease conditions where it will require us to have differentiated solutions. So we're continuing to build products to make us better at finding patients. One of the things we're investing in is not just relying on digital advertising, but how can we rely on more robust data like pharmacy or medical records to be able to identify and match patients? So that's something that we're working on now in the near term. And then as we look out to the next 3 to 5 years, that's really where we're going to start thinking about how do we monetize and help these patients in different aspects of their care beyond just clinical trials, and serve our pharma customers in different parts of their business beyond just R&D. Because through this whole journey, we're building a pretty large following of patients. We have a patient database of 3 million patients who have responded to AutoCruitment, are actively looking for clinical trial opportunities. Now that we've rolled out our medical record product that we have this year, we have enriched medical record data on about 1,000 of them. So that's only going to grow. And there's going to be lots of opportunities for us to think about how do we work with our pharma customers to engage that population.
I'm curious just because I don't know. What's the, we'll call it avatar for the client who wants to be in it? What's the typical, and I'm sure there's a couple, but when you go 3 million patients that want to be involved in clinical trials, what's driving it?
Yeah, I think clinical trials are often really misunderstood, where people don't really understand why people want to do it. If you ask patients why they do it, it's really there's a couple of reasons. One is there's absolutely patients that are doing it for altruistic reasons. If if they know a family member or if they've been exposed to a need for research, that is definitely a driver. But some of the other more, practical reasons are cost and access. When you're in a trial, your health cost, your medical costs go down substantially. You get access to specialists, and you get a lot of their time and focus and energy that you wouldn't under normal care. And then, of course, the third reason is access to a new treatment before it's on market. And depending on the disease state, that could be something that some patients are pretty desperate for. A lot of the areas that we work in are disease states where there's not really a lot of treatment. Like we just finished a Tourette study where we were kind of blown away at the results, like how many patients we were able to find in a very short period of time. But I think it's a patient population just doesn't really have a lot of options.
Yes, they're looking for, hey, is there something new that may help? Well, and that's why Jill, I didn't understand that well enough. I've been involved in on a, I'll call it arm's length
Yeah,
for clinical trials and various things, but like in the lab space and others where we're doing lab testing
yeah, yeah.
for
Most
it.
people
But
don't. That's why most people don't know about clinical trials. That's why it's so costly to just find participants and finish a trial.
if we jump ahead to that end of frame, like here's where we want to see success, here's what the challenge is, what would you step back and go, we were successful if 3 to 5 years from now?
I mean, we're successful if we are the leading patient recruitment firm. We have solutions and go-to customers in all of the major therapeutic area spaces. That would be CNS, GI, cardiovascular, respiratory, oncology, rare disease. Oncology and rare disease are the harder ones to get to. Um, and we have the largest access of patients that have the opportunity to participate in research, new treatments, or in clinical trial opportunities. I mean, that's really what we're working towards.
And if follow-up question was, well, what will be our biggest challenges in arriving there? What would you say?
I think one of the things that we're battling through now, and I could see that happening, as we get through there, is just like how quickly we can implement innovation. We're a technology based company where it's the foundation of our whole operations, and there are so many different things that we want to implement and take advantage of, but it's challenging to get that stuff into production quickly enough when we're also managing the business day to day. So I think that's the balance we're trying to strike now as we're kind of pivoting away from like stabilization of the business and, significant growth.
Yeah, awesome. As you reflect on the last couple of years and the years ahead, what advice would you give others that have faced or will face where you're at? Like, if a listener is like, "Hey, I'm trying to scale a business," or "I know I need to scale beyond where I'm at," and you reflect on kind of what you guys have done there, what would you share?
I mean, I think the learning I've had around bringing the team along for building the strategy is a huge one. And I would definitely encourage to make sure you have the right leadership team in place and make sure that they're highly engaged and they're owning that goal with you. Um, and then, I mean, there's a lot of like little tricks along the way that I've learned in terms of like stepping out of the business and helping your team. But I mean, I think that was probably the biggest learning I've had in the last couple of years.
Follow up on the leadership team. Have you had to make changes?
Yeah, I think the main thing I was looking at when I came in is who do we need from the outside? Because I think the AutoCruitment team has done a phenomenal job, and I've got really great talent on the team. So it was more about how do we supplement that team than how do we change. So I have brought in new leaders in HR, and that was really about like graduating HR from like a HR like execution group to an HR leader that will really help me drive culture and engagement throughout the business. I also brought in a new leader in digital advertising, and that was really driven by the need that digital advertising is changing all the time. We want to stay ahead of that, using AI and all the new technology that's used across the different platforms. And then I've also brought in new leaders for sales, and that was driven by, really wanting to bring in somebody that knew our customers better than any of us, including myself, do. And that's been a real benefit.
So, Jill, in that answer, I heard, "Hey, where I needed the most change, I infused with the new because what was there, it's harder to change." And that's always
Yeah,
an
that's
interesting
true. Yeah, yeah,
change.
yeah.
And then that's always hard. Usually, I say always, usually hard to manage. Is there any aha in that? Like, hey, this infusion of new idea against the this is how we've done it. And it sounds like you had a pretty open team in terms of change forward. Sounds like there was an imperative change. They understood it. There's a change in leadership. So everyone was on board for change. But my experience is no matter what, that's still hard. Um,
Yeah.
is there any aha with I've infused new leadership talent to help me drive change? How did we as a team manage that?
I think knowing that the management system was going to be the underlying like backbone of how we managed the business, somewhere along that journey, I did start to change the way I was hiring new people into the business. And one of the things I learned is that the management system, it isn't for everybody. It does require leaders to be very vulnerable and exposed.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, And some people love the management system because they absolutely thrive on the transparency. They love the visibility they're getting into the rest of the business. So I really try to find people like that, because if they're not willing to be vulnerable, if they're not willing to openly work with their peers and to solve problems, they're not really going to work within our business. So I definitely like have adapted the way I hire for the business, knowing that like that's the culture that we have here at all.
Curious, two follow-ons, and then we'll start to wrap. In that description, you've talked about what I call high performing, high accountable teams, and that those who want that want it. Like, please
Right.
let's go perform at a really high level. Let's hold each
Yeah.
other accountable. And it never feels or rarely feels like we're attacking. Instead, it's this fixed forward mindset. Like we want to be better. Better's
Right.
better.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are people that look at all of that and go, "No, I'm threatened by it." Like
Yes.
there's a speaker that I saw talk about it. As they said, for most organizations, there's this unwritten rule of I won't call you out if you don't call me out. Um, and high performing teams go, "No, we call out everything, and it's not
Right.
perfect. It's just there's a
It's
better."
not personal. Yeah.
So you describe that, and then I go, "Well, great. How do I assess that to bring new people onto the team? How are you?" You talked about, well, I'm doing that better. How are you doing it?
Well, I usually, I mean, I share them the whole management system. I pull up the exact our tracking sheets, which are our reports that show the KPIs, and take them through it and show them exactly what they're going to be responsible for. I talk about the other functions. And you can usually tell with that conversation whether they're going to be nervous about it or uncomfortable with it. And and what I found is the people that do well in it are the ones that they're not really focused on their own function. They're more focused on the others. So like that's amazing. Like I love that I can see that part of the business. And I think that that level of engagement and excitement outweighs their worries about their own function where it,
That's awesome. I think Lencioni describes it somewhere. I can't remember if it's in The Advantage or one of his books. Is the one team, and that we're concerned about CEO leadership team, about that team versus my downward team. That no, it this is the AutoCruitment team,
right.
and I
Yeah.
that more than I
Yeah.
care about sales or ops or whatever is
Right.
my
Yeah.
downward team.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that I will be curious to help the business succeed. I will make trade-offs to help other departments get better. I will release resource instead of hoarding it. Um, but your description there is perfect, which is I'm just outlining how we act and behave here. This is the system we use, and I joke and go, you can tell usually that people are
You
either
can tell.
I get
Yeah.
compelled, or they're like, oh, that's awesome, or
Yeah.
you get very like, really, you guys talk about this every meeting? You're like,
Yeah.
yeah, you may
Or they
not be
or they
right.
start already debating the number you put in front of them. It's like, okay, not gonna happen.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. If people want to know more about Jill or AutoCruitment, where should they go?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn and then our company, www.autocruitment.com. You can go there to learn about our business. If you need help on a clinical trial, that's where you go.
Really appreciate your time today. Some fantastic lessons, wisdom, openness. So I always appreciate that. That
Yeah,
helps
really.
others follow behind us. Um, thanks a bunch.
No, thanks, David. It was a good. I don't normally talk about this stuff, so it was a good conversation. And I'm gonna steal your fix it forward. I like that. It's a
There you
good
go.
mentality.
Awesome. Thank you much.
Yeah, thank you.